So I'll turn to you next.
Yeah, I am. Thank you. My testimony draws from public health economic analysis to understand the potential impact of the Environmental Health Justice Bill, which has major deficiencies. I would first like to provide the context for my testimony. When DC Council debated and approved the comprehensive plan in 2021, it should have required the mayor to submit an environmental impact assessment as is law. For nearly 20 years, the executive has proceeded with acute gentrification and urbanization that have harmed communities, particularly Black and low-income communities. The last environmental impact assessment in 2006 spanned over 300 pages. Southwest has uniquely become a constant construction zone wherein we are paying the cost for gentrification and displacement policies with our health and erosion of neighborhood livability. For more than a decade, we've asked for something to be done about the cumulative adverse impacts of industrialization and redevelopment. In the preceding decade, the district has done exactly what it wanted to do with intense redevelopment and ignored the bigger picture of environmental racism and community and ANC 60 concerns. This bill does not at all address the adverse impacts of redevelopment. As I wrote to council several months ago, DOEE has data substantiating that nearby construction is a major source of elevated blood lead levels in children. The district cannot pursue both gentrification utopia and make environmental justice achievable. Council routinely does not hold the executive accountable for what the law says. Much of what is in this bill advances what would have been captured in the environmental impact assessment that I mentioned earlier. Much of what this bill advances already covers many existing laws, particularly on point source mitigation, but DOEE has poorly implemented district law, seeking in effect deregulation and for polluters to regulate themselves. In Mr. Allen's ward, buildings have been constructed on highly contaminated land near vulnerable communities without any DOEE mandate for mitigating harm. For more than 3 years, the government has not satisfied my FOIA request on district monitoring of the Audie Field Voluntary Cleanup Plan. DOEE has not produced a final report on compliance and monitoring related to Audie Field. My major point here is that the bill will absolutely not work based on the current underperformance of DOEE. Several revisions are needed for this bill. The bill allows for the executive to use ward-level comparison. That language should be eliminated to ensure environmental equity across the district. The bill should call for removal of current sources of environmental injustices rather than give the executive any more latitude, which it has abused. The district's completed environmental assessments should be instructive. In the Department of Health Office of Health Equity's Chase report, they claim that the community's current vulnerabilities would mean that construction of Audie Field would have a negligible impact on communities. In other words, the community already had too many vulnerabilities. This bill would make little difference in how the district conducts environmental impact assessments and therefore have little impact on turning a corner on environmental injustices. The bill needs more to convey an understanding and to affect the public health economy around environmental health. Thank you.
And thanks to everybody on this panel. I had just a couple of quick questions, I think. To Mr. Williams and Ms. Bishop, I was going to start with you if I could. You may have heard of my discussion on one of the earlier panels. One of the witnesses raised what I think was a very valid point, which was there's an inherent conflict that is going to take place between an action that would be taken by the government and then an analysis of cumulative impact that would be done by a government entity. And so from a trust and confidence perspective, you know, what I was asking her is, are there other ways that we've seen other jurisdictions or other places that can allow that analysis or that evaluation to take place that gains confidence of community that all too often has a a rightful distrust of government and decisions being made because there's been so much cumulative impact there. Just wanted to ask your thoughts on what do you think this legislation would need, or ways that that natural conflict could be addressed in a way that builds trust with community, and especially the communities that have suffered the disproportionate impact of bad decisions over the years.
Yes, I'm happy to go first, unless Mrs. Bishop would like to go.
No, go ahead, Mr. Williams.
Okay. Well, I have a couple of points. One is that we need to depoliticize these assessments. What I attempted to illustrate in my testimony was that we have not just underperformance, but we have government policies and oversight regulation that is not really looking after the public interest. And where we have asked for these assessments, as with the Chase report that I recommended, the findings were underwhelming, and there was almost no follow-up in terms of the ways in which the community has been surrounded by acute redevelopment and related activities, such as construction, such as higher vehicles in the area due to tourism and the like. And so I think it's absolutely vital to make any cumulative impact assessment to be nonpartisan and to be independent. I think that the Council Office on Racial Equity has done a remarkable job in providing council with important information for proposed legislation. Of course, you know, the kind of independent agency that I have in mind would be under the executive branch, but certainly there is a way to make that agency independent, and I think that that's absolutely vital. So that's the first point. The second point is that we need to strengthen the language to accelerate health equity, environmental justice by deindustrialization. So as you know, Mr. Allen, part of the rationale that we were told in Southwest for why these polluters needed to stay in the community was because they produced ready-made concrete, and in the last 10 years, this ready-made concrete needed to make its way to gentrification hotspots in Southwest, Navy Yard, and downtown. In order to get to environmental justice, we are going to have to make some choices around how we build our communities. And in part, I think what that means is that we can't continue to concentrate all of this redevelopment in and around Southwest and downtown. As the comprehensive plan lays out, we've got to really begin to redevelop in other hubs in the city. So those are, I think, two major points that